Hi, I'm Lizzie and this is Laura, and we are sailing on board P&O's Aurora for her New Year's cruise.
This is a 5-night cruise that calls in Hamburg and Bruges. If you'd like to see what we get up to on the whole cruise, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the videos.
Last night we stayed in Southampton for the night. We stayed in the Moxy hotel. We'd never stayed there before, and we had a comfortable room. We thought it was good value for money. We paid £69 for the room, and quite often it can be more expensive than that to stay there. So if we found that deal again, we would stop there pre-cruise.
We were also able to park in the multi-storey at West Quay shopping centre, which is really convenient. Just a short walk up the road with our suitcases, and it wasn't too difficult to do that at all. Checkout from the Moxy wasn't until 12 o'clock, which was quite convenient really for a cruise stay. That meant we had time to go and get some breakfast, pop back and sort ourselves out before we were ready to head over to the cruise terminal.
We checked out at the hotel at 12 o'clock and got ourselves an Uber from the hotel to the cruise terminal, and when we turned up the queues weren't too bad. We were earlier than our embarkation time, so we joined the early arrivals queue.
Shortly after we got into this queue, it did start moving and people were moving into the terminal building. They were calling times out of the queue, so if you do get there early and then your time does come, they are pulling you out of the queue and moving you straight into the building, so you don't need to stress too much about that. And yeah, it did start moving and we got to pretty close to the front before all the problems started.
We knew from people inside the terminal that the ship hadn't been cleared yet for embarkation and nobody was going through security. So they stopped people from going into the cruise building as the seats were now all full inside there.
So at this point we were outside the building with zero communication really from P&O or anybody at the port to tell us what was going on. The only reason we knew what was going on was because Tom and Dom, who you may know, were inside the building and they were sending us updates about what was happening in there. It was a while really that we were outside until they restarted embarkation, and by the time embarkation did restart, our boarding time had passed.
Security opened at 1:53, so that is nearly 2 hours after it is supposed to be open. At that point then the queue did start to move and they were calling time, so they started calling from 12:30.
Unfortunately, P&O hadn't let anybody know in advance that there was an issue with the ship that meant that nobody could get on. This meant that people kept arriving, so as you can imagine it was now very full in the outside areas. We were at Mayflower Terminal, which isn't massive, and there were a lot of people now standing around waiting and trying to get inside the building.
It was also apparent that it was becoming a little bit dangerous now, so they were calling times out and people were just pushing past each other to get to the front because you were stuck in a big massive queue. This meant that we actually saw a woman get pushed over. It was an accident, it was not intentional, but unfortunately it did happen and
she was hurt. She did need assistance. Somebody had to come out and help her, and it didn't change anything about how they continued with the embarkation. They still persisted with trying to get people to push their way out of these tightly packed queues.
At 2:25, a man then stated to us that it would be at least half hour before our time was going to be called. By this point now, we had been stood outside for 2 hours. We obviously are quite capable of standing outside for 2 hours, but there were people standing there that were struggling by now and it was starting to get cold.
This did move a little bit faster than the 30 minutes they predicted, and we were called into the terminal building just after 2:35, which was, a bit better than we expected. But again, it was a little bit chaotic getting in there, and we were a bit disappointed to find that when we entered the building, there was a sea of empty seats that people that were outside could have been using, and the check-in staff were simply sat there chatting. They weren't checking anybody in because everybody had already been checked in.
From this moment now, everything did move on quite quickly. We checked in. We even had to have new photos taken because the ones Laura had put on were terrible.
I just did anything so it would let us pass the check-in.
And then we got asked to sit on some seats. We were sat on them for literally 2 minutes before then we went through security like normal, and then we were finally onto the ship. Probably took around 20 minutes in total from the moment we entered the terminal building to get in on the ship.
Whilst we totally appreciate that ships do have problems. These things happen with ships because they move, essentially. What was really disappointing from P&O, and this is the general consensus around ship as well, is the lack of communication. Nobody at the port was explaining what was going on, and we were 2 hours late boarding. And to be honest, P&O could have just sent a message and asked people to arrive at the terminal a bit later, which they did do for Ventura, who was also departing on the same day.
When we got onto the ship, the first thing we did was head down to our cabin. We wanted to get rid of the bags that we'd got with us, and our suitcases hadn't come yet, which we were surprised at because lots of suitcases were in the corridor. We grabbed our cruise cards and met the cabin steward. He introduced himself to us, and then we headed off to go and get some food because by now we were quite peckish.
On our way to get food, we checked in at a muster station and had our card scanned, and then we just popped up to the grill area and got some slices of pizza. It was really interesting actually that you could help yourself to the fries there, which is different to what we've been experiencing recently on ship. So we had a few of those as well, and we met up with Tom and Dom, who had been on the ship for a little bit longer than us now. But yeah, we caught up with them, sat and ate our lunch and had a drink.
We then headed up to the Crow's Nest to go and get a drink. Up there, while we were there was the muster announcement, which I must say everybody listened to very attentively. Laura's favourite thing is she'd gone to the toilet at this point, and as she was coming back in, someone was like, "Oh, have I walked into a meeting?"
We then just spent some time having a wander around the ship. It'd been a little while really since we've been on Aurora, so we wanted to refamiliarise ourselves, and it did feel really busy everywhere. We know this is basically a full sailing, so there isn't a lot of space on board.
We then stopped at the glass house because it was quite hard to get a seat anywhere, but the glass house wasn't open until 6. It was about 10 minutes to wait, so we just thought we'd sit and wait, and we got served a drink. It was nice to see some staff that we already knew from previous cruises up there. While we were sat, we learned about some passengers who actually had been not allowed to get on board the ship because their cabins had been, well, from what we hear,
damaged. From what we hear,
wet, I think, flooding. So we were quite relieved, to be honest, that we actually made it on board, and we hope that everybody managed to get on in the end.
After we enjoyed some nice glasses of wine in the glass house, we popped back to our cabin to get ready for the evening.
On the way to dinner, we grabbed a drink from Raffles and then headed down to the restaurant. We have been given late dining, which is what we requested, and a table for 8, which is what we requested, as we always enjoy meeting new people on cruises.
As always on the first night on a cruise, it was a little bit busy and a bit disorganised, shall we say, in the dining room. We had to wait a little while before our order was taken, and also a while before we were actually had a drinks order taken. The drinks came out a bit sporadically across the table as well. There is a bar actually inside the dining rooms on Aurora, but clearly they didn't have everything they needed at that bar, so I think the waiters were ending up going to different bars to collect different drinks.
Because this is only a 5-night cruise and it's New Year, we decided to treat ourselves to the deluxe drinks package to give it a go and see if it was worth the extra money. The big advantage of this is that you get given large glasses of wine, which is really helpful in the dining room because you would never have got served 2 glasses of wine last night at dinner.
For dinner this evening, there were a few choices actually on the menu that we both wanted to try. I had the Iberico ham croquettes for starter, which I have had before and have enjoyed, so I knew I'd like that one. And then for my main, I had the stone bass fillet, which was also a really enjoyable dish. The piece of fish itself was really thick and it was really nicely cooked, so I did enjoy that meal.
I went for Caesar salad for my starter. Again, I've had it before and I know I like it. And then I had lamb for my main course. Now, my main course was actually a really big portion. I think I had a whole field of green beans on it, which unfortunately I don't like it anyway, but there was loads of lamb on it, and I must say it was really nice and tasty.
By this point, time was pushing on, so we were second sitting, which starts at 8:30, and we wanted to make sure we got to the theatre for the 10:30 show. So unfortunately, we had to skip dessert to make sure we got there in time.
On the way to the theatre, we grabbed a drink from Champions. It was really easy to get served at the bar there, walk straight down, and then very luckily we had a great view.
In the theatre tonight, we had a singer called Laura McGann. She's like a soprano singer and performed a few songs from musicals, a bit of pop, and a bit of opera, so it was a good variation, lots of different music, and you know, she had a really good voice, clearly very talented. Wasn't my cup of tea, but there were definitely people in that audience that really enjoyed the performance.
I enjoyed it because I always wish I could sing like that. We then headed to Masquerade, which was really, really busy. The reason why it's so busy is because Carmen's is closed until the 31st of December. There is maintenance work being done in there. There is a lot of maintenance work going on the ship at the moment. And that then means that other venues are busy because that's taking quite a big venue out of the equation.
We really enjoyed our evening in Masquerade. We spent some time chatting to some fellow passengers. One of the couples from our dinner table came and joined us, and we sat with Tom and Dom. So it was really nice, friendly atmosphere, and everybody was clearly up for a good time after a stressful embarkation day.
We then headed up to the late night buffet, probably about 1:45. We were quite close to the finishing time of it, and just grabbed some really weird platefuls of food. A bit of a combination of curry, sandwiches.
I had some chips, I think. Oh, the cakes as well up there were really nice. There was some, I say they were really nice. They were basically like leftover cakes with a few Christmas decorations on top.
They looked nice.
Yeah, they were enjoyable.
We then stopped off at Masquerade on the way back to our cabin and grabbed some water from there. The bar was actually shutting. And he didn't look impressed that he had to serve us, but he did because he knew we only wanted water. And we just had a little wander around before we headed back to our cabin.
And it's a good job we got that water too, because when we got back to the cabin, it's super hot in there. You might be able to tell right now that we're still very, very hot in our cabin. The air conditioning isn't working in our cabin at all. And you might think that wouldn't be a problem on a winter cruise, but unbelievably, it is really warm because there's just no air circulating. We have reported the issue to reception and we're waiting to see if that can get resolved.
Despite embarkation being very stressful, we have still managed to have a good day. Lots of people on board are obviously up for a good time, and there seems to be a decent atmosphere on here with people being very friendly and chatty. And we're looking forward to seeing what the next few days are and hoping that this cabin becomes more like an icebox.
Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up down below and drop any questions you've got in the comments. Please also make sure you subscribe to our channel, as that really helps us out. You can also follow us on social media. We're Sisters on the Seas.